a formless stillness called a nameless light. And Sri Aurobindo tells us here that light is primarily a spiritual manifestation of the divine reality, illuminative and creative. Then he says material light, the light that we see, is a subsequent representation or conversion of it into matter for the purposes of the material energy. Now, I have to read this. I may have read it before, but it is one of my very favorite quotes on light. Our sense, by its incapacity, has invented darkness. In truth, there is nothing but light. Only it is a power of light, either above or below our poor human vision's limited range. For do not imagine that light is created by the suns. The suns are only physical concentrations of light, but the splendor they concentrate for us is self-born and everywhere. God is everywhere, and wherever God is, there is light. And Mother wrote to my dear friend, Dimitri van Morenschild, whom many of you know lived until the age of 100 in the ashram in Golconda, the following, quote, "The light is everywhere. The force is everywhere. And the world is so small." Oh. So we'll carry on. Above him was the white, immobile ray. Around him, the eternal silences. No term was fixed to the high-pitched attempt. World after world disclosed its guarded powers. Heaven after heaven, its deep beatitudes. But still, the invisible magnet drew his soul. Well, this is something that we have to meditate on. This ray that creates all light, he calls it a white, immobile ray. And in physics, of course, in optics and physics, the definition is any of the lines or streams in which light appears to radiate from a luminous body. Oh. Sri Aurobindo says in his letters on yoga, even if there is much darkness, and this world is full of it, and the physical nature of man also, yet a ray of the true light can prevail eventually against a tenfold darkness. Believe that and cleave to it always. I think that has to be our watchword. It has to be something that we live by, knowing that no darkness can even resist one little ray of light. Oh, that's so powerful. So around him now, the eternal silences. Notice that he capitalizes the word ray and he capitalizes the word silences. Now, no term was fixed to the high-pitched attempt. Well, you see, the attempt of the avatar has no term fixed to it. He comes again and again into our lives. Each time there is the possibility of an ascent in the evolution. And so therefore no term is fixed to this high-pitched attempt. And then Sri Aurobindo gives us a semicolon. And he says after that, world after world disclosed its guarded powers. Well, the powers of these worlds necessarily have to be guarded because we're not ready for them. They would smash us if they came down in their full force. Mother never showed, except once, her power, and I've talked to you about that with Huta. Heaven after heaven, its deep beatitudes. Now, this line has always, it has always charmed me in a way, that there could be heavens after heavens. But still the invisible magnet drew his soul. I think there must be something in the Vedas for these heavens after heavens. Vladimir, could you say a few words?
Yes, it's actually in the Hymns to the Mystic Fire. He translates it as a veil upon a veil, yes?
Yeah.
And truth upon truth. Truth is hidden by the smaller truth. So it's like everything is unfolding. So it goes deeper into the deeper dynamic truth. So veil upon veil is how is that? Level upon level, I forgot the word, is born in the lap of the mother the soul sees. So these veils of the truth, of the dynamic truth, are hiding that our soul is in the lap of the mother, and there it sees. So beautiful.
Yes. So now we have 3 more lines, and we will complete Canto 1 of this great book of the Traveler of the Worlds. A figure, soul on nature's giant stair. Remember, he's climbing this stair, but he's alone there. No one else is with him. He mounted towards an indiscernible end. This end cannot be seen or perceived clearly. It's imperceptible. On the bare summit of created things. Notice Sri Aurobindo tells us this is the summit of created things. So we'll now move on to page 103, and I just need a moment to bring that up. And we will continue with the next canto, Canto 2, in which Ashwapati, Sri Aurobindo, enters the kingdom of subtle matter. And we know that Mother talks to us often about subtle matter. So let's see what happens here now. In the impalpable field of secret self, this little outer being's vast support, parted from vision by earth's solid fence, he came into a magic crystal air and found a life that lived not by the flesh, a light that made visible immaterial things. This subtle world is so interesting, and I think, Vladimir, we could talk about this for the entire session. In this impalpable field, this impalpable means difficult to perceive or grasp by the mind. and it's not even perceptible to touch. It's intangible. So in this impalpable field of secret self, and what is this field of secret self? Well, he tells us this little outer being's vast support has now parted, it is parted always from vision by Earth's solid fence. I understand that to be matter and our place in the evolutionary journey, because the solid fence of the mind, of the vital, of the body, that's what we have. But we don't have this, we don't know as yet this field of secret self. And that is the psychic being, which Mother tells us very often is not in ourselves, but around ourselves or just outside ourselves. It only really comes in when we call it in and we still the mind and we invoke the Mother to give it to us. So this vision, this little outer being's vast support, is parted from vision by this solid material world we live in. There's a comma there, so I have to continue. He came into a magic crystal air and found a life that lived not by the flesh, a light that made visible immaterial things. And we have to have the feeling of the mantric lines here. He came into a magic crystal air and found a life that lived not by the flesh, a light that made visible, immaterial things. So we have that made visible being an anapest, 3 beats in one. So he's coming now into this totally new area of subtle matter. And there's a magic crystal air there because he finds this life that doesn't have to live by the human body or in the human body. And he even sees a light that has made visible immaterial things. Immaterial, of course, is having no material body or form. So we'll continue on a little bit because this is so extraordinary, this place that he's coming into. A fine degree in wonders hierarchy, the kingdom of subtle matters, fairy craft, outlined against the sky of vivid hues, leaping out of a splendid trance and haze, the wizard revelation of its front. Now, I'm not too sure that we did subtle matter. Vladimir, do you recall?
I don't think so.
I don't think we've done it. So who could read that for us? Perhaps Dolan? Or Soumya?
Where do you want me to read?
The definition of subtle matter from the lexicon. Do you have the lexicon?
No.
Well, then I have to send it to you. Please send me your email and I will forward the lexicon to you. Who has the lexicon and could read for us?
Can I read?
Surely.
Much more than half our thoughts and feelings are not our own in the sense that they take form out of ourselves. Of hardly anything can it be said that it is truly original to our nature. A large part comes to us from others or from the environment, whether as raw material or as manufactured imports. But still more largely, they come from universal nature here, or from other worlds and planes and their beings and powers and influences. For we are overtopped and environed by other planes of consciousness, mind planes, life planes, subtle matter planes, from which our life and action here are fed or fed on, pressed, dominated, made use of for the manifestation of their forms and forces. The synthesis of yoga.
Let's stop there for a moment so we can go over this paragraph. It's so extraordinarily powerful. He says, first of all, more than half our thoughts and feelings are not our own. In what sense? In the sense that they take form out of ourselves. Of hardly anything can it be said that it is truly original to our own nature. My gosh. And now, where does it come from then? A large part comes to us from others or from the environment. How does it come? Whether as raw material or as manufactured imports. What a line. But still, more largely, they come from universal nature, here or from other worlds and planes, and their beings and powers and influences. So, how does it come? A large part comes from the environment. We know that. It could be family. It could be education. But it comes as raw material or as manufactured imports. So we find that our thoughts are not really our own. And they even more largely come from universal nature. Then he says, here or from other worlds and planes. And in those other worlds and planes, they come from these beings and powers and influences. For we are overtopped and environed by other planes of consciousness, mind planes, life planes, subtle matter planes, from which our life and action here are fed. Oh my gosh. Or fed on. Pressed, dominated, made use for the manifestation of their forms and forces. So please continue now. 2 more.
Mind, therefore, is held by the Hindus to be a species of subtle matter in which ideas are waves or ripples, and it is not limited by the physical body which it uses as an instrument. Essays in Philosophy and Yoga.
We'll talk about that later. Continue on, please.
All that manifested from the eternal has already been arranged in worlds or planes of its own nature, planes of subtle matter, planes of life, planes of mind, planes of supermind, planes of the triune luminous infinite. But these worlds or planes are not evolutionary but typal. A typal world is one in which some ruling principle manifests itself in its free and full capacity and energy and form. Our, a typal world is one in which some ruling principle manifests itself in its free and full capacity and energy, and form are plastic and subservient to its purpose. Its expressions are therefore automatic and satisfying and do not need to evolve. They stand so long as need be and do not need to be born, develop, decline, and disintegrate. Essays, Divine and Human.
So the first essays in philosophy and yoga, he says that mind is held by the Hindus to be a species of subtle matter in which ideas are waves or ripples, and it is not limited by the physical body, which it uses as an instrument. In other places, Sri Aurobindo talks about these universal waves or ripples. One person may refuse it because he's not interested in it. Another one may pick it up and it's a genius idea. And then that genius says, oh, I found this. This is mine. I created it. And Sri Aurobindo says, ego, sir, ego. It was not anything that we created. And the next paragraph is so wide, so vast. All that manifested from the eternal has already been arranged in worlds or planes of its own nature. Planes of subtle matter, planes of life, planes of mind, planes of supermind, planes of the triune infinite. Now, this is extraordinary. In other words, there is a planned arrangement by the eternal of all of these worlds and planes, which we can access as we grow in consciousness. Some of us can touch planes of subtle matter. Some of us experience planes of life and mind. A very few may experience planes of supermind, and even fewer planes of the triune, luminous, infinite. But then he tells us about these worlds or these planes, and he says they are not evolutionary, they're typal. And typal worlds are free, and they have very full capacity and energy. They're plastic and subservient to its purpose. And the expressions are therefore automatic and satisfying. They do not need to evolve. They can be there as long as they need to be. They don't have to be born, develop, or decline, or disintegrate. Would you want to give us something from the Vedas, Vladimir?
There is a state, I remember the line, state upon state is born. You know? So these are the states which do not need to evolve because they don't need to change, because they provide all the materials needed for evolution of the being. So we draw from them, we build on them. Yeah, they build us as a material substances. They invest into this being, and we select and combine them in evolutionary process and build an evolutionary being.
Outlined against a sky of vivid hues, leaping out of a splendor trance and haze, the wizard revelation of its front. And then that line, that next line, that Well, many lines, and I must read them. We'll go a little late today. A world of lovelier forms lies near to ours, where, undisguised by earth's deforming sight, all shapes are beautiful and all things true. If any of us have touched those worlds, we know exactly what Sri Aurobindo is telling us here. I have seen a few of them, not many. A world of lovelier forms lies near to ours. And though that world of lovelier forms is not disguised by this deforming sight of earth, earth seems to deform everything, because even though it is a being and a conscious being, it still also has to evolve along with man. So to deform something is to spoil its natural form, to misshapen it, or to spoil the beauty or appearance of it. But he says there, in that world, all shapes are beautiful and all things true. And then he's going to continue, and I'll do a few more lines. In that lucent ambience, mystically clear, the eyes were doors to a celestial sense. Hearing was music, and the touch a charm, and the heart drew a deeper breath of power. What is a lucent ambience? Well, lucent is basically something that gives off light, that is luminous. Can be translucent also and clear. And ambience is a character or a tone. In that, and mystical, of course, is always not apparent to the intelligence or senses. I will not use the word occult here. In that lucent ambience, mystically clear, the eyes were doors to a celestial sense. Hearing was music, and the touch a charm, and the heart drew a deeper breath of power. Any questions from anyone? Soumya, do you have a question? You usually do.
Yes. You know me so well. So this could be a little personal, but I would love to get your advice on this. When we realize that the universal mind, all the thoughts that come in from the universal mind, but lately what's happening in the US with all these school shootings and stuff like that is really upsetting my kids. And I keep telling them, you have to put those thoughts aside and only let in the luminous ones. But it's still difficult for them to cope with this news. How do I help them in this situation, Naradji? I know it's a little too personal, but when you brought up the universal mind, this question came to my mind.
You have to encourage them to begin to look into themselves. How old are they?
My daughter is 18. She's the one who's is a little too sensitive, and it's hard for her to cope with this kind of news.
I understand, but you understand this is a very dark force of mind control that's using these people to create these damages. And Shraddhalu has a lot to say on this. I would ask your daughter to set aside at least 10 or 15 minutes each day, it can be morning or night, and focus her consciousness only on the good and the beautiful and the true and the light. And she will find as she goes deeper and deeper within that nothing in this world can resist the light. And everything will change in God's time. Yes, we are going through a very, very difficult time right now because all of this has to come up in the world for it to be purified. The forces of darkness are very much against the forces of light, but they have no chance. And they know that they have no chance, and so they're much as active as they can be, at least to hold back the light. And if your daughter can begin to understand it in a much wider range and not take anything personally, because she is a child of God and she has to continually remind herself of that. And have her take 10 or 15 minutes every day and just focus on the light and the truth and beauty. Namaste all.
Thank you. Narad, namaste.
Thank you.